Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are struggling to find their way in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy of The Man Crisis in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today.
Last weekend we had a mass shooting in Poway, California. And this mass shooting, which took place at a synagogue, took the life of a 60-year-old woman, severely injured an 8-year-old girl, and a rabbi. And this mass shooting that took place in Poway, California, fits right in line with the pattern and profile of mass shootings I have talked about in numerous videos, and the shooter himself fits right within line of the pattern and profile regarding beta males that I talk about regarding mass shooters and in my book, The Man Crisis. And when I take a critical look at this John T. Ernest, he is a textbook beta male. And when it comes down to your beta males, like your John T. Ernest, what usually motivates these beta males to go out here and participate in violence like the John T. Ernest participated in is the fact that many of these beta males, they oftentimes live in a very distorted picture of the world, and they have a very distorted perception of the world. So when you deal with the beta male, he does not see the reality that is in front of him. He sees a distorted picture of the world in front of him due to the dysfunctional way he is raised, whether it be in a single parent home or a home with a beta male father. Because in both cases, these beta males, they are enabled by their parents, and it's that enabling that prevents them from seeing the world around them or processing information in a way where they can think critically about it. And when I take a look at your John T. Ernest, it is clear to me that this beta male has really poor processing and critical thinking skills because he couldn't really process information very well. And this individual, he wanted to live in a smooth world, and he felt that his smooth world was going to be threatened by these religious institutions. So he would sit there on the internet listening to all of these numerous websites which were Islamophobic and anti-Semitic, and he would listen to these people talking bad about Muslims and Jews, and he would not process that information with any sort of filter. And this is common for many of your beta males, because many of your beta males, they oftentimes buy into rhetoric and they don't think critically about the rhetoric that they're listening to, or think critically about the sources of the information they are listening to or reading on internet forums or other forms of media like YouTube videos or other forms of media like much of the anti-Semitic literature out here or the anti-Islamic literature out here. Many of these beta males, if you put information in front of them, they take that information literally, because in most cases your beta male is a follower, and because he is a follower, he does not have critical thinking skills and does not know how to use logic and reason as related to the information in front of him. He just takes the information given to him as is without going out here to look for a counter source or looking for information that will also reinforce the arguments placed in front of him. Whenever you place an argument in front of a beta male, he will take whatever it is as literal truth without ever trying to challenge that information by finding counter sources and counterpoints. And this is very dangerous, because when it comes down to the beta male, in his single-mindedness, he takes that information without ever thinking critically about it and believes it for the gospel truth. And this John T. Ernest, this 19-year-old beta male, was so caught up in the rhetoric of white supremacy, white nationalism, he believed it to be the gospel truth, and he believed that these people, these Jews and Muslims, were the ones responsible for the bad state of America, and he wanted to go out here and do something about it. And when it comes down to your beta males, because they aren't problem solvers, they usually react to the information in front of them, and because they react to the information in front of them, they get caught up in their feelings about things and look to act rashly about them. And when it came down to this John T. Ernest, he was so caught up in his feelings about the anti-Semitic information he had been reading on the internet and many other sources that he didn't think to respond by taking a critical look at that information to see that most of it was slanted. So he was so caught up in his feelings about this rhetoric he had been reading on these numerous white supremacist and white nationalist websites that he wanted to take some sort of action to try to make his world smooth again. And part of those actions were writing that manifesto, which outlined his plan to destroy that mosque in California. And then he wanted to escalate his behaviors because he didn't get the attention he wanted to get. This is another part of the beta male's behavior. The beta male not only wants to go back to having a smooth world, he wants to send a message to the rest of the world that people will not behave like this, and if they do behave like this, there will be consequences for the action. And this beta male's behavior was no different than what your Ku Klux Klansmen used to participate in back during the days of Jim Crow, where your Ku Klux Klansmen, when black people were considered to be participating in behaviors the Klansmen didn't like that disrupted their smooth world, like voting, opening businesses, or not dealing with racist whites, they wanted to terrorize those people by participating in these acts of violence, like lynchings, to send a message to those people that they need to stay in their place. And what your John T. Ernest wanted to do is he wanted to put the Muslims in their place by burning their mosque, and what he wanted to do at the synagogue was go there and murder lots of Jews to put them in their place, and he wanted to destroy these people so that he could have his perfect smooth world where only white people would be on top and only white people would be in charge. And it clearly shows how dysfunctional these beta males are and how sick and evil these beta males can be when they are out here and they are just thinking of things to act on. Because when it comes down to the beta male, there is no boundary for his behavior, and because there is no boundary for his behavior, he will participate in some of the most depraved violence and believe he is justified. And this beta male, your John T. Ernest, felt justified because he saw another beta male, this individual who participated in the mass shooting in Christchurch, murder 50 Muslims. So he felt that if he could go out here and do this, that he could do it too. Because when it comes down to your beta males, a lot of times, again, they are followers, and a lot of times they follow each other because they want to get the same attention for their criminal acts, and they want to send the same message. And in both cases, these white supremacist, white nationalists wanted to send a message to the people who are minorities that they were going to be a message that they would be punished if they got out of their boundary. And what they wanted to do was send that message, and they also wanted to inspire others to participate in the same violence. Because this is when it comes down to a lot of these beta males, this is almost like a competition, And what they want to do is see if one individual can rack up more bodies than the other. So this is also another disturbing trend about these beta males and them competing. And I talked about this in the videos regarding Stephen Paddock, that a lot of times these beta males, they are competing to see who can get the highest body count, and they want to see who can get the most attention for the violence they participate in. And this is what's really scary about these beta males, like your John T. Ernest, is this is what the way they are thinking, and a lot of people don't even know they're thinking, because as many people stated about your John T. Ernest, they said that he was a nice young man, he was very quiet, and they never saw it coming. And usually when it comes down to these beta males, most people never see it coming, because oftentimes these beta males, they are simmering and boiling in anger, in silence, and most people don't know when these guys are going to go off, because a lot of times they are ticking time bombs, and because they are ticking time bombs, no one knows when they will go off or what damage they will do when they go off. Thank God this man's AR-15 jammed before he could participate in the carnage he wanted to participate in, and he could have slaughtered more innocent people, all because he was in his feelings about the Jews and the Muslims, and he was caught up in rhetoric that he didn't even understand and has not even been able to process, because he was more in his feelings about ideals, because he didn't live in the real world. And this is another problem with beta males, is they live in that rose-colored world, which is distorted and looks like our world, but it's extremely distorted. And because it's distorted, they can't see the reality around them. So these men are very gullible and susceptible to things like rhetoric, but from people like your white nationalists and your white supremacists. And because they are gullible, they will wind up believing the rhetoric of people like white nationalists and white supremacists, and they are easy to use as pawns to go out here and participate in this violence, because any logical thinking person would take a critical look at all of the violence that these beta males participate in, whether it be Islamic terrorists or your white nationalists and your white supremacists, and see that all of these isolated incidents do not lead up to what many of them want to make this race war, because these are isolated incidents done by an individual who in many cases, because he's living in a rose-colored world, is a complete coward. And he's a coward because he always wants to go out here and attack others who cannot fight him back. And in this case, there was a guard on duty who was armed, and he managed to fire back at this guy. But in this case, it also proves that even with armed guards, there is no real way to deal with this case of the mass shooters, or this trend of mass shooters with guards or with weapons or even gun control, because the big problem in America is the way we have been raising boys over the last 50 years. Because over the last 50 years, as we have been indoctrinated into this feminist culture, we have been told that a woman could raise a boy on her own, and that we were socially engineering these soft males like this John T. Ernest. Yes, he was good at the piano, but he did not have the male life skills to be able to think critically, navigate through his emotions, or be able to take information and process it in a way where he could understand that a lot of this information out here from these groups, you have to question the source, you have to question where it comes from, and then you have to use counter information to come up with an objective analysis of that information. Because when it comes down to information from websites like those run by racist and white supremacists, they are usually filled with a lot of propaganda and they are usually filled with a lot of misinformation. And a beta male, because he is so caught up in his feelings like a female, he takes that information for fact without ever thinking to question it or challenge it. And because this John T. Ernest didn't think to question or challenge that information, he has lost something very important, which is his freedom. And he lost his freedom, and he's going to go out, he's going to jail for the rest of his life on hate crime charges and murder charges, all because he got caught up in his feelings over misinformation given to him by a bunch of people who are cowards and a bunch of people who egged him on into a situation where he destroyed his life. And this is what happens to a lot of beta males, because beta males are followers, and because they follow other people, they usually wind up falling into a ditch because of their behavior. And this man wound up destroying his life at 19 years old, all because he decided to follow the rhetoric of hate groups in white supremacy and white nationalism. And there are those who want to try to turn this around in the Republican Party and saying that this has something to do with black people. No, this had nothing to do with black people. Black people had nothing to do with this. This was a beta male acting on his own, and this beta male needs to be held accountable for his actions, and the message needs to be sent to the world regarding this beta male that his violence will be dealt with in a way where he will be punished for his actions, and he will be punished to the full extent of the law for his actions. Because when the law enforcement sends that message, it sends a message to these other beta male white nationalists who want to follow in his footsteps that there will be consequences for their actions and consequences for their violence when they want to go out here and perpetrate these hate crimes against other people. And that's the message that needs to be sent for the short term. But for the long term, we really need to start making efforts to do something about this man crisis here in America, because the reason why we have had this escalation in mass shootings here in America and this escalation in hate groups here in America is because we have this 2 to 3 generations of beta males out here, 2 to 3 generations of men who grew up without fathers, 2 to 3 generations of men who never learned male life skills, 2 to 3 generations of men who never learned male survival skills like critical thinking or how to use logic and reason, like this John T. Ernest never learned. And because those 2 to 3 generations of men have never learned how to think critically or how to use logic and reason, this is why we have many of these beta males falling into these pitfalls like these hate groups, and many of these beta males believing that they can make their world smooth by participating in violence like mass shootings. So until we deal with this man crisis here in America, where we have 2 to 3 generations of beta males running around being ticking time bombs that may possibly go off and explode in their anger regarding the world, we won't be able to stop the destructive violence of these beta males until we acknowledge and confront the problem, which is the way boys are being raised, and in these single mother households and even in these 2-parent households. Because if we don't deal with the way we raise boys, we're going to continue to have a crisis regarding the men here in America. If you'd like to learn more about why beta males participate in mass shootings, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle versions. And if you want to pick up The Man Crisis, you can also pick it up at the iBookstore or Barnes & Noble or Smashwords. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.